Hey y'all, it's Cara. Today we're making a really big pot of soup. The soup we're going to be making today is a creamy tortellini sausage soup. This soup is one that the kids ask for all the time, and my husband too. It is kind of addictive. I crave it quite often. This soup's pretty easy to whip together. It only takes a couple little steps. So if you're interested in finding a new soup recipe, join me and let's put it together. I feel like September's the start of soup season. The weather's starting to get a little cooler. We've had like 70-degree days here the last couple weeks, and so it's been really nice. And I love a good hearty soup for dinner with some fresh homemade bread. And trying out new soup recipes is always fun because sometimes things can get a little monotonous if you make the exact same type of soup all the time. So new recipe inspiration is always fun. This video is actually in part of a collaboration with Leanne over at Mennonite Farmhouse. There's going to be a whole soup playlist of a bunch of different YouTubers coming together to share some of their favorite soup recipes. So if you want to check out that playlist, I will leave it in the description box below the video, and you can see all the information on that. She's also going to be doing a live stream on October 3rd with a giveaway, and I know they're going to be giving away some other prizes too. So I'll leave more details to that in the description box too. I have a pretty decent sized stock pot here on the stove. This soup recipe does make quite a bit, so you want to make sure you just have a pot big enough to handle the soup. The first thing we need to do is brown up our meat. I'm using a breakfast frozen sausage. This is just a plain breakfast sausage. This is ground turkey because this is what I had hiding in my deep freezer. But traditionally, I use a sweet Italian sausage for this recipe. Because I'm using plain unflavored sausage, I will be adding a little bit extra Italian seasoning to the soup once we get to the seasoning portion. So first thing you need is a pound of sausage. I'm using breakfast frozen sausage, but sweet Italian's my favorite for this recipe. So we are just gonna add our sausage to the pot and cook it up. While the sausage is browning, let's cut up the rest of our vegetables for the soup. The first veggie you need is 2 carrots. I've already washed these carrots, and you just want to peel them before you put them into your soup. And I'll take the peels over to the compost. And then I'm going to cut all the carrots into just small, bite-sized pieces so that they're easy to eat in the soup. I forgot to put on my apron. Before I get too far here, let me go stick my apron on because this white tank top will not be white by the end of cooking if I don't do that. I'm a bit of a messy cook. I try not to be, but I always end up staining something. Okay, now that my apron's on, let's finish chopping up these carrots. I'm also just remembering to stir that ground turkey sausage so it doesn't burn. When you are browning up your meat, just leave some of it into about, I don't know, dime-sized pieces so that you get a good bite of sausage throughout your soup as you're eating it versus having it all be completely smoldered, completely pulverized and like very, very finely chopped up, squished up, cut up, whatever the words, you get the gist of it. These carrots were harvested from the garden. We got a pretty good carrot harvest this year, considering that my kids just dumped a seed packet. We didn't space them out into rows or anything. Now, half of my carrots did get harvested early because the kids were helping and they harvested them all when they're about that big. So we just had some baby carrots earlier on this season instead of full-grown ones. But we did still get a pretty good harvest of the big full-grown carrots too. Now, one thing in the garden that struggled a bit this year was the onions. Now, The very first year I planted onions, and last year too, we got pretty good size, like softball size onions. This year, they weren't quite as successful. You can see my little scragglers down here. Oh, hi, Scotty. The onions are a lot smaller this year. Now, I did experiment with my onions this year. The last 2 years, I spaced them evenly, about 6 inches apart, fertilized each individual hole that I planted the little onion starts into. And this year, I put them all in the same bed, spaced them closer, and I didn't fertilize as much, and it definitely made a difference. So it was a good trial, and sometimes you have to do those little trial experiments in the garden to know if something's really worth doing, or if you're doing it just because that's what you're supposed to do. Because sometimes things surprise you and you don't necessarily need all those extra steps. But for onions, you definitely do. At least that's what I experienced this year. But your garden, your soil, your climate may be different. So onions are the next thing that do need to be chopped up. So I'm just gonna move these carrots over here to this bowl because we're not quite ready for them to go in the pot yet. And we'll dice up the onions. For the recipe, you really only need one. Oh, I got a carrot stuck to my hand. You really only need one big onion, but because the onions I harvested from the garden are smaller, I'm gonna do, I think they have like 3 smaller ones because I feel like that's the equivalent to one large onion. So if you have normal, big, beautiful onions, then just one. Oh, fly flying around. Anyway, as I was saying, your onions, one big onion if you have normal size onions, or if they're small like mine, a couple, so that you get a decent amount for the soup. So you just wanna chop those up, dice them up into small size pieces, and we'll saute them over on the stove. With cooking or with any recipe, you can really experiment. You don't have to have exact measurements for everything. Tweak things to how you like them. Some of the best recipes have been accidents because I didn't have the set ingredients that the recipe called for, and I experimented a little bit and it turned out great. My problem is I never write down exactly what I make and how I make it, so sometimes it's a little hard to replicate it. I'm trying to be better about that though. That's one of my goals. One of my goals for this year. Dropping onion peels. There's a lot of dirt still on these onions too from being in the garden. So I will have to give this cutting board a wash before I dice all these up. I should probably move them to the side. Like, look at that one. It's so tiny. Oh, that's so sad. It barely grew at all. This one's halfway decent, but still not as big as I would like them to grow. The cutting board's pretty dirty, so let me go rinse it real quick and then we'll dice up the onions. One thing about homegrown food is sometimes there's a little extra dirt and you have to clean as you go, but I'm not complaining about that at all. There we go.
I still have a lot of onions left over from last year's harvest that I diced up and put in the freezer. But I'm using these onions that I harvested this year first because some of them are already starting to go a little bit bad. I'm trying to make the most of everything that we grow in the garden. Since we spent so much time and energy growing the food, I want to make sure we put it all to good use and use it in the kitchen too.
I have videos on our channel of our onion harvest from the last few years. So if you want to see those, I'll leave them in the description box below this video and you can check out those videos. We do a lot of harvesting videos on our channel because I think it's really fun to see what's growing in the garden. And then taking those garden harvest videos and then going into the kitchen with them and cooking up food is always fun for me. I'm definitely a foodie and I love really good food. And that's one of the main reasons I grow a garden, is because feeding my family with delicious, fresh cooked food from the garden that you've grown yourself is very rewarding, and it also just tastes way better. I mean, if you have a garden and you cook from scratch from home, you know what I'm talking about. Food that you grow, it doesn't get any fresher than that. And the better tasting your food can be, that's definitely bonus points in my book. Now, whereas we don't grow all of our food, we definitely do try to make the most of our space and grow what we can. I've got my onion all diced up now, so now we're gonna saute it. The turkey sausage is all done browning in the pot, so I'm gonna remove that, put it on some paper towels to let any extra grease get off of it. Because it's turkey sausage, it probably won't have very much, but if you're using a sweet Italian pork sausage, you definitely wanna use this step and take it out and get all that extra grease off. And then we're gonna add a few tablespoons of butter and saute up our onions until they're nice and translucent. I'm also going to be adding my carrots as well, about halfway through the cooking process of the onions, so that they get a little bit softer too. I like my carrots to have a little bit more of a crunch in the soup, but if you want yours to be completely mush, add them as soon as you add the onions so that they can soften up a little bit quicker. But first, let's get the sausage out of the pot. I'm gonna do just about 2 tablespoons of butter. Remember just to give your onions a stir every couple minutes as they're cooking so that none of the pieces burn to the bottom. And we're just cooking our onions until they're translucent. They don't have to be completely translucent because they will continue to cook a little bit more once all the other soup ingredients are in here. However, I feel like they taste the best when you've sauteed them a little longer in the pot before you add all the extra liquid. The onions are about halfway cooked now, so I'm just gonna throw in the carrots. This recipe, you can also add some other vegetables too if you'd like. You can turn it into more of a potato style soup if you add some potato diced chunks up in there. You could also add parsnips. There's really a lot of variations you could do to it. But the traditional way I normally make it is with carrots. You can see the onions just have a little bit of color starting on them. That's what I'm gonna throw in the carrots. I'm gonna cook it for maybe 3 to 5 minutes or so. Again, stirring every once in a while so nothing burns. While the carrots and onions are sauteing, let's prep the next step. The next ingredient you need for this recipe is some spinach. Now, you could really use as much or as little spinach as you want. I like a little more spinach, especially during the winter months or early spring when spinach is growing in the garden. I use a lot of spinach because then I can use up a lot that's growing in the garden. For this recipe though, I would say about 5 cups. But again, use your judgment, use as much or as little as you want. For the spinach though, all you need to do to prep it is wash it and then give it a fine chop. Now, spinach does look a lot bigger before you cook it. Once you cook down spinach, it shrinks up quite a lot. So don't be intimidated by doing a little extra because after it starts to cook, it'll really reduce in size. I like to give my spinach just a rough chop so that there's no real big pieces when you're eating it. Again, I'm not really measuring, but about 5 cups or so. 5 really big handfuls.
Now, I'm not exact when I measure. When I mean big handfuls, I really just mean a handful. This can, again, be an estimation. It doesn't have to be perfect. I would definitely include spinach, though. Don't skip this step in the recipe. I think it does add a lot of flavor and some yummy texture.
Our onions and carrots have all softened. You can see they've kind of taken on a little bit of a golden brown color. There's a couple chunks of sausage still in there too that I didn't all scrape out from earlier. I'm just gonna move all the onions and carrots over to one side of the pot. And then on the other side of the pot, I'm gonna put 1/4 stick of butter and 1/4 cup of flour and make a little bit of a roux. I am just using a salted butter. It doesn't really matter what type you use though. So a good little chunk of butter, melt that down, and to that we're gonna add 1/4 cup of flour. This is just basically a thickening agent that will make the soup a little bit more thick and creamy. You can skip this step if you like your soup on the thinner side. It'll still be pretty thin considering how much liquid we're about to add here in a few minutes. But I've always done this step. It just kind of thickens and creamies things up a little bit. And so as the butter is melting, let me see if I can bend y'all down here to show you. You can see I've pushed all the carrots and onions to one side, and the butter and flour are here on the other side. Then I'm just gonna consistently stir the butter and the flour for about a minute, just to cook off that flour a little bit and make sure everything is thoroughly cooked. As you stir it, it'll kind of gump together and look a little bit the consistency of kind of Play-Doh or raw dough. And that's exactly what you're going for. Now that our butter and flour have been cooking for about a minute, we are gonna add our liquid to this pot. I have 5 cups here of chicken broth. We are gonna pour it in a little bit at a time. Whew, if I don't spill it everywhere. And stir in that liquid with the flour and butter roux that we just made. You want to do just a little bit at first so that you can really make sure you get all the lumps and clumps out of, and that everything is smooth. Okay. Then once you have that little bit mixed in with the flour roux mixture, go ahead and just dump the rest of it. See if I can do it without spilling this time. Success. But I do need to clean up all my spills here. Told you, I warned you at the beginning when I went to put on my apron. I always make a mess in the kitchen. My brain moves faster than my hands most of the time. At this point, you can go ahead and add some seasonings. I'm gonna be doing about a tablespoon of Italian seasoning. Now, I'm adding a little bit extra because I'm using the plain breakfast sausage versus Italian sausage. Taste it as you go to adjust the seasoning and spices to whatever level you want. Let's see here. I think I have, there we go. I got some Italian seasoning in here. So I am not really a measure, but a good solid, oh, see, I'm spilling again. A good solid handful of Italian seasoning. After I finish cooking, I always vacuum the floor because I always dropped something. And then I dehydrated all my garlic into garlic powder. But if you had fresh garlic, you would have wanted to add about 3 cloves back when the carrots were sauteing. Because I'm using powder, I'm just gonna add it in now. And I'm gonna do maybe like half a handful, so about half a tablespoon of garlic. About that much. Again, you don't have to be exact with cooking. You can eyeball it here and there and taste it as you go. That's one of the ways that I think things turn out really good, because you're tasting it and adjusting it to your preferences of how you like it. If you like things really, really garlicky, add more garlic. Or if you want it really spicy, you can add some pepper or chili flakes at this point too. That'd be nice. I'm also gonna add back in all of my sausage too. To this, I'm gonna add a good healthy pinch of salt and pepper. I personally really like fresh cracked pepper. I feel like it tastes a lot more flavorful than pre-ground pepper, but whatever you have works perfect. A couple really good turns of that, and I'll taste it after a while and see if it needs any more. And a couple really good turns of salt as well. And give that a stir, and we want to bring this up to a simmer. All right, now at this stage, the soup won't look super appealing. It looks a little brown, but it will look a lot prettier here in a few minutes once we add in our dairy. So right now, this is what your soup should look like. While their soup is cooking and simmering away, I'm gonna make some fresh garlic bread to go with it for our meal today. Last night I made a fresh loaf of bread and I just sliced it up. I'm gonna put a little butter and garlic and then bake it in the oven just for a few minutes until it gets nice and golden brown. Move my spinach out of the way. We're in the South. I like a lot of butter in my bread, so we're gonna do a lot of butter.
Like real butter. This butter is Kerrygold, which has some pretty good flavor to it, I think. Another favorite of mine is the Amish rolls of butter. I don't know if you've ever seen them before, but sometimes in the store there'll be a log of butter called Amish butter that's rolled in typically parchment paper. That is really good butter too.
And then just a little bit of garlic sprinkled all over the top. Just gonna do a little pinch on each. And then we're gonna pop it into the oven for just a couple minutes until it's golden brown. And I'm just putting it on the broil setting. So. All right, we're almost done. So our carrots, onions, and broth have been simmering for about 5 minutes. I like to give it a little extra time to cook so that all the seasonings kind of mix together and get really rich and nice. This soup's actually the best the next day reheated because all the flavors have had time to really infuse into the liquid of the soup. So if you want it to be extra yummy, make a double batch and then eat half of it the next day. So now that everything is cooked down and it's been simmering away, I am gonna add the rest of our ingredients. The next ingredient you're gonna need is 2 cups of half and half. You could also use whole milk or an almond milk or some other milk substitute, but half and half really gives it the creamiest texture and makes it very rich. So we're gonna stir that in. And now the soup looks a lot more pleasant to look at. And then we're also gonna add in our chopped spinach at this point. And to the pot, we're gonna add in some cheese tortellini. Now, I just bought a family-sized bag of cheese tortellini at the store. Tortellini is just a little pasta that is filled and stuffed with cheese. It's kind of like, I've got some spinach on my fingers. It's kind of like ravioli, but a lot smaller and it has a fun little circle shape. This bag is 36 ounce. I'm gonna add about half of this bag. Add as much or as little as you'd like. Just make sure that there's still liquid left to cover over the pasta so that it cooks thoroughly. And then you just want to follow the instructions on the back of your bag of how long the pasta needs to cook for. So this pasta only needs to cook for 3 minutes. I do have it frozen though, so I'm gonna cook it maybe for about 5. I will pull out one piece of the pasta and test it to make sure it is fully cooked. And we're gonna give that a good stir. And we're gonna stir all that in together. I've also used this recipe with kale and other collard greens instead of spinach. Use whatever you have growing in your garden. Right now, I don't have any lettuce growing in my garden. I do have some little baby ones coming up for fall, but spinach is just what I picked up at the store. So we're gonna bring this back to a boil and cook it for 3 to 5 minutes or however long your tortellini instructions say to cook it for, and then we'll be almost done.
I've been I've been stirring this soup every few minutes just to make sure nothing sticks to the bottom. Sometimes these tortellini pieces can get stuck to the side or the bottom of the pot rather, if you haven't been stirring it. So just keep stirring it. This especially is true if you're going to let things simmer for longer and let those flavors really develop. Normally, if I am going to be letting it simmer on the stove for a long time, though, I will not add the tortellini and the spinach until the very last minute. That way the pasta still has some bite to it and it doesn't go completely mush. But it is really, really good if you let it sit in the fridge overnight and then reheat it the next day. I've mentioned that already, but it really is so good.
The garlic bread's almost done. One of my jobs as a kid was always to sit right next to the oven with the light on and watch garlic bread cooking. I have lots of memories of doing that. Garlic bread can go from perfectly golden brown to burnt in like 2 seconds if you're using the 550 Fahrenheit broil setting on your oven. So you've really got to sit there and watch it like a hawk. And that was definitely one of my jobs growing up. So my mom taught me well. I am making sure my garlic bread does not burn. It's getting there. It's almost perfect. Just another like 30 seconds or so and it'll probably be done. Yep, it's done now. Let me pull it out of the oven. Now that is like the perfect slice of garlic bread. The back of my oven definitely cooks a little hotter than the front of my oven, but that piece is perfect. I'm gonna pull out just one piece of the tortellini and cut it in half and make sure it is fully cooked through before we serve up our meal here. I have a hard time trusting times on packages. I like to test it for myself. I'm just gonna cut the tortellini in half. Let's see here. See, it has a little bit of a cheesy filling. I don't know if it shows up well on camera. Yep, it's cooked through. I love cheese tortellini. So yummy. Let's dish up our soup so we can eat.
I wish y'all could smell how good this soup smells. And because I've made this soup, I don't even know, countless times before, I know it's going to taste really good too. I'm very excited about this meal. When I told my husband Ryan that I was making this for lunch today, he got pretty excited too. So the whole family likes this soup recipe. It is definitely a win. You need to give it a try. Thing I always add to the top of my soup is some freshly grated Parmesan cheese. This is an extra step, but it's so yummy. You can put as much or as little of the Parmesan cheese as you'd like, but I'd recommend a lot because the freshly grated Parmesan is yummy, yummy.
All right. There you have it. There is our cheesy, creamy tortellini soup. I hope you guys enjoyed this recipe. Subscribe to our channel and like today's video if you did. And leave a comment down below what your favorite soup recipe is. And if you think you'll give this one a try too. If you do give this soup recipe a try, post a picture of it and tag us on Instagram. Our Instagram channel is also linked in the description. It's Bluebird Homestead. I'd love to see your versions of this soup, any changes you make, and how you guys like it. And be sure to check out the link in the description box below this video that has the playlist of all the other wonderful YouTube creators who are sharing their favorite soup recipes for this fall. There's lots of good soup recipes out there to try. I know I will definitely be trying all of them myself. Thanks so much for watching. I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you're at. And I'm gonna go grab my family and we're gonna go eat some soup. Bye all.